Hello and welcome, dear listeners, to Healthy Waves, where we dive deep into the currents of knowledge with experts from various fields. I'm your host, Avik, and each episode brings you the engaging discussions with thought leaders and the trailblazers. So, from mental health to career success, our goal is to explore the different perspectives, uncover insights, and also inspire the positive change. So, today we have an incredible guest who's ready to share their expertise and the experiences. So, why to wait? Let's get started and make some of the waves of our own. So before we start, I would love to introduce you to all of our listeners. So dear listeners, Phyllis, our guest today is a distinguished psychotherapist and an author of America in Therapy. So with over 30 years in the field, she offers a profound perspective on healing and national mental health crisis. So her latest book uh, presents innovative approaches to fostering the hope and addressing our collective challenges. So welcome to the show, Phyllis.
Thank you so much for having me here. It's really a pleasure to be with you.
Lovely, lovely. So Phyllis, to start with, I mean, if you can share your book, America in Therapy addresses the national mental health issues. So what inspired you to take a broader approach and uh, write about healing as a national level?
Well, I've been a psychotherapist for over 30 years, almost 35 years. And I've worked with so many people, with children, with couples, with families, with individual adults, with all kinds of issues. I think for many psychotherapists, after many years, you start to see patterns. You start to see what some of the overall ills are that are impacting families and the way we bring up our children and the conditioning we've all had. It became very clear to me a number of things became very clear to me. One is that there's a lot of emotional abuse and neglect and dysfunction widespread in our population. And I don't think America is alone in that. I think that is a global problem for many, many people, that families are hurting. And there's a lot of intergenerational trauma that never gets addressed and just keeps getting passed on from parent to child, from one spouse to another, and influences their children. And to the extent that we don't have a chance to heal, we bring those unhealed wounds into our relationships on the playground, in the workplace, in college, into our future adult relationships with our spouses and children, and in the workplaces we end up in. And I saw those patterns rippling out, in kind of in two ways. So I talk about the microcosm and the macrocosm, and the microcosm is us individually or our individual families, and the macrocosm is our larger communities, our workplaces, our huge corporations and institutions, and our places of government. And they all actually operate on family dynamics. We bring our roles and our conditioning and our values and our behaviors and our coping mechanisms with us wherever we go. And to the extent that they're not healed, if we've learned to be dysfunctional, if we've learned to be really aggressive and not listen to other people, if we've learned to be really passive and always submit because we were overpowered, if we've learned to just check out and use substances to hide our pain, we're going to do that. Not everybody does that. There's no one size fits all, but the patterns are that we tend to repeat what we know unless we've had a chance to heal, or had exposure to something much healthier. So I just took the lens of what's a healthy family. A healthy family is where you feel loved, where you feel valued, where you feel supported for who you are as an individual, where there's good boundaries, where I end and you begin is some place that we can navigate in a healthy way. Um, and especially where conflict is resolved without violence. And there's many attributes of a healthy family, but those are some of the key ones. We all We all want love and belonging. We all want safety. We all want to be provided for. And yet, in our larger families, and particularly sometimes in our governmental institutions, we're not creating healthy families. We're actually targeting people. We're blaming people. We're not resolving conflict without violence. We withhold resources. We see some people as inferior. And these are all signs of mental ill health, because when they play out in an individual family, it's easy to see, oh, if you're beating your child, there's something mentally unhealthy that's going on. And yet, when a nation enacts war against its own people or deprives them of resources or assaults them because they're of a marginalized population, um, they're behaving as an abuser. And I felt like I needed to talk about that, not from the point of view of who do we hate next or how do we blame people, but what have we learned in the field of psychology that interrupts this cycle of dysfunction, abuse, and neglect on a family level that we could bring to national conversation, that we could hopefully bring to national policy and practice, so that our largest institutions are also healthy families and supporting us to have healthy families. And we know, I'll say one more thing and then please jump in. We know on the individual family level that one person can change the dynamic. Not always, but one person, by healing their own wounds, their own dysfunctional behaviors, can turn a family around, can make it safe, can make it loving, can make it supportive, can bring different values to a family, and we can bring that to a nation. We can bring that to national conversation and talk about what are the new paradigms we need. And they're actually not new. They're just not being used. I call them the answers lying hidden in plain sight. And I'll just say that I think our collective mental health is the big missing from national policy.
Mm.
I
Understood.
see you
Understood.
shaking your head a lot, so please share what you're thinking.
No, no, I'm listening, and I'm also trying to relate with things, and also I'm also thinking at the same time, like there will be definitely listeners who gonna resonate with these things. So definitely, this is a great uh, sharing, I would say. So and also while also discussing on this, I was thinking like for the approaches, right? So uh, like therapy addresses, right? So on this, uh, you discuss the correlation between the personal dysfunction and the whole societal issues as well. So if you can also explain or maybe elaborate on how these principles from uh, psychotherapy can be applied to heal the larger societal platforms or the and
Yeah.
problems altogether.
Well, one major thing is that in a dysfunctional family, people are not listening to each other. People don't know
Mm,
how to talk without either fighting or silencing each other,
yeah.
or inflicting pain on each other or ostracizing them. In a dysfunctional family or an abusive family, we don't know how to address our differences and work them out for everybody's benefit. So, those are some of the best principles of the best psychology. It's not the only thing, but let's start there with what I would call the skills of nonviolent communication. And we don't see this in our government. We don't. We have people attacking each other and calling each other names and, vilifying them and spreading untruths about them. These are all things that dysfunctional families do. So one of the basics is to really and this is what we do in good therapy when people come and they want to resolve their conflicts,
Yeah.
um, is we teach them how to talk and how to listen. And I say it this way: how to talk to other people the way you would actually like them to talk to you, how to listen to other people the way you would like to be heard, That's the bottom line for nonviolent conflict resolution and communication. We don't act out. We don't, whether it's just rolling your eyes and stomping your feet or slamming a door or assaulting someone, we don't do any of those things. We lay our weapons at the door if we really want to change the way we're relating to each other with any hope of resolving our conflict and reconnecting with each other so that we actually feel like we belong to one another, which is what we really all want. Of course, it's more complicated on a national level because sometimes people don't feel like they do want to belong to another group of people. They just want to dominate them. But in the world we live in today, domination and just getting our way without listening to other points of view or factoring other people into the equation of what matters and what policies we make can and does end in armed conflict. And our ability to kill each other on a mass scale is only escalating with the kinds of weapons that we've created to somehow imagine that we can keep ourselves safe with them, when in actuality, we're just, destroying human life and the planet itself. So the motivation, I think, could be really high if we recognize it, that not only is it a more a happier and more thriving and sustainable environment to live with people that you actually are committed to working things out with, but it's actually in our best interest for the survival of the human race. So the bottom line really is, how do you learn to talk to others the way you want them to talk to you or listen the way you want to be heard? Um, there are some really very fundamental principles that lie at the heart of that. That whether we say them or not in a therapy session, they are the underlying guiding principles, and I'll outline some of them for you that I talk about in a whole chapter in my book. And that is the first one I've mentioned. We lay our weapons at the door. I'm not going to scream at you. I'm not going to call you names. I'm not going to roll my eyes. I'm not going to sigh like you're just a, disgusting person. I'm not going to threaten. I'm not going to do any of those things because I don't want you to do them to me. When I'm talking from my heart about what really matters to me, I don't want you to roll your eyes or walk out and slam the door. I really want you to hear me, even if you don't agree. So, the bottom line for everything I'm going to say is really, I take responsibility for myself instead of blaming you, because blame just, evokes blame. I blame you, you blame me back. And we're in a tug of war, and nobody wins that tug of war. And we just become more and more estranged, more angry, more hurt, and possibly more violent. So the first one is we leave our weapons at the door, and that's all of our psychological weapons. Obviously, we're not going to bring real weapons into, a mediating kind of session. Um, but when we think about a country, what does that mean? So I'll leave that one and we can come back to it if you want to. But the second one is, I just really reflect on myself. Who am I being? What are my motivations? Do I have an injury myself around belonging or feeling heard or feeling like I have any personal power? Am I bringing my injuries to this conversation and acting them out on you, or acting them in on myself, or projecting them onto you, or imagining you're projecting those things onto me? So it's a lot of personal accountability and self-reflection. And if you've been in an argument with another person, that is very hard to do. We all think we're right, right? And we all think the other person is wrong. But what if you've ever had the experience where the other person has actually taken a moment and reflected on themselves and owned something? Oh, I actually really am kind of talking in a very loud tone of voice, and that probably isn't contributing to this conversation. Or, yeah, I did roll my eyes when you said that. I'm sorry. Or, you remind me of my mother and it just triggers the heck out of me. Or whatever a person does to reflect on themselves leads into the third principle, which is we take responsibility for ourselves. Okay. So if I have a harsh voice, instead of blaming you for what you said, that I reacted harshly, because that's what we do, right? Well, I said that way because you did blah, 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 blah. I just take responsibility and I stop talking that way. I talk to you the way I want you to talk to me, which is not only in a calm tone of voice, but with some kind of openness to validate what your position is. Even if that's hard for me, even if I really don't agree, because that's what I want you to do with me when you don't agree with me. So we have restraint, we have self-reflection, we have taking responsibility, and that leads into the fourth principle, which is if I'm really accountable for myself, I may need to make amends to you. I may need to say, I'm really sorry that I yelled, or I'm sorry that I walked out. I will come back and sit down and really try to listen the way I want you to hear me. Or maybe there's something bigger I have to be accountable for. Maybe I had an affair and I really have to hear your pain. Or I humiliated you in front of our friends and I really have to make amends for my behavior, because that's what we want from other people as well. And if I am willing to say, I'm sorry for what I did, and I've had this experience, believe me, I'm talking from experience here of being very flawed in relationship myself when I'm triggered or in conflict. I've had that experience where when someone actually takes responsibility with me, I'm much more likely to do the same. And when I've been the one to go first and say, okay, I'm sorry, I'm going to lower my voice, I'm really going to listen to you, I won't interrupt you, almost invariably, they're willing to meet me there. So any one of us, like I said, can change the dynamics of a hostile or conflictual relationship. And once we've both really done that, and again, I may be alone in that. You may not be meeting me there, or you may be alone in that, and I may not look like I'm meeting you there, but I stay there. I don't give in to retaliation or blame or assault of any kind. Um, and I advocate for resolution. Is there a compromise we can make? Can we agree to disagree and still be friends? Is there something you need from me? And is there something I need from you that we can give each other to come back to the last element, which is that we're reconnecting, because that's what actually feeds peace. That's what feeds cooperation. That's what feeds valuing of each other. And that's actually what feeds sometimes what's necessary is a deep inquiry into what are the wounds that I brought to this? Maybe I never felt heard. Maybe I never felt valuable. Maybe I never felt lovable. And I'm projecting those things all over our relationship. And you're doing the same. So maybe, so not maybe, often when we've been able to embody those six elements of repairing our relationship and making it more sustainable and open, we're open to actually hearing the pain that each other brought to the situation and not just the anger or not just the fear. So those are some basic principles, and I would love to see there be this kind of facilitation in our highest levels of government, not only to work out, how we've become so divisive and so assaultive toward one another. And so I'm going to beat you in this election rather than how are we going to work together for the good of the national family? How are we going to come to the table and actually listen to each other for the sake of the good of everyone in this country? That I would love to see those principles adopted in our highest levels of government for two reasons. One, so that we'd have much better opportunity to work out our differences and be a team. And two, because if that was what was being role modeled from the highest levels of government, if that's what our children and ourselves saw modeled in the news every day, imagine what an impact that would have compared to see people, say nasty things about each other and just try to beat them from every angle that they can. I can't hear you. Hmm. I have lost your voice. Can you hear me?
Am I audible now?
There you are. Yes, there
Yeah.
you are.
Yeah. So while also discussing this, I was also getting this thing like when we know about these issues about our society, about the society. So, what according to you, in your view, what are the most urgent steps that we need to address, uh, like the divisiveness and the violence which is happening in our society? So,
Yeah,
what do you think?
yeah. Well, I think the way we talk to each other is number one, or it's crucial because if you look at any conflictual couple, they don't know how to communicate in a way that serves repair of the relationship. So I think we have to hold to the nonviolence as an underlying principle. But there are other things like there are many other things, and I have different chapters addressing different issues, but I'll mention what some of them are. So one very important issue is that I think we really need to focus in America, and I would imagine this is true around the world in many countries, on the welfare of our families. Families are suffering. There's an inordinate number of people, way higher than 50%, who are suffering from economic insecurity in America today. I think one article I read said 70%. That's a lot of economic insecurity. There are
Mm.
children living in poverty who don't have adequate breakfast and lunch when they go to school. There are people who are not earning a living wage, even when they're working a full-time job, can't pay their rent. There's an escalation in homelessness in many areas. Um, so I think we have to really reallocate our resources to good education for everyone, healthcare for every child, healthcare and family, providing mental health services for people who are suffering from intergenerational trauma, who are suffering from present day trauma, from discrimination, from poverty, from addiction, and all of the ills of society that really are ills of the family of America. They're not, and we tend to blame our victims. Well, you're poor because you weren't motivated or you didn't try hard enough. Not true. We have an imbalance in our economic system that puts many people at risk for never being able to break out of poverty. So I think we have to look through the lens of the individual family and commit to providing what every family needs, because when we do that, we grow healthy children. And when we grow healthy children, we don't grow rapists, we don't grow exploiters, we don't grow murderers. We don't. And so it really starts with the family. And we have to look at what are the values, what are the practices, what are the principles of the larger family systems that are impacting individual families, and ask ourselves if they're healthy. And if they're not, how can we expect to get different results than what we're getting?
Definitely, it's 100% true. Yeah, it's all about the family. Yeah. And also, when we're talking about this, how can individuals contribute to creating a more loving and sustainable world based
Yeah.
on the therapeutic principles that you discuss in your book?
I love that question because I think a lot of people today feel like the systems we live in are so out of control and so beyond their reach to impact that I think a lot of people either feel hopeless or they just
Yeah,
don't want to deal, and they putting their head in the sand because they really don't know what to do. Um, so what I would say many things. Do what you're called to do. Some people are really called to be activists and speak out or write letters to the editor or be part of a peaceful demonstration or run for office, or change the policy in their company or their school or their home. Do what you're called to do. But for many people, they're not really called to participate on a big social level, and that's okay. Many people are focused on their children and their family or their job or just trying to survive. And what I would say there is don't underestimate that no matter how small you think your sphere of influence is, you can make a difference. When you smile at someone at the grocery store instead of barking at them, when you treat your child kindly, you make a difference. When you are, honest in your dealings with the people that you work with or that you interact with, when you don't steal from a grocery store, um, do you know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
When your individual behavior really impacts the people around you more than you know. Like I know, one day I was parking my car in a parking lot outside of a store, and I honestly failed to see that somebody else had wanted to turn into that spot. And she got out of her car and started screaming at me. And I just said, "I'm so sorry," but it impacted me. It impacted me, and I had to, like, kind of, like, get that vibration off of myself because I hadn't intentionally, tried to harm her or rob her parking spot. Um, so we can all be that person who just lets it go or is kind or doesn't react back when someone else is having a bad day, and maybe she was having a bad day and she let it out on me, I don't know. Um, but you know what I'm saying? And the other thing that I'm saying here is that um, when I think of there are a couple of people when I was young who really made a difference in my life. And they were people who really saw me and they really valued me. They saw something in me and they spoke to that. And we can be that for our children. We can be that for our spouses. We can be that for people we work with. I have worked with so many people in my office who are trying to survive in workplaces where they never feel valued, where they never feel seen, where they don't get a promotion for their hard work, where they're mistreated because of the color of their skin or their gender or whatever. Um, and life would be so different for them, and the energy and the feelings they would bring back to their family at the end of the day would be so improved if they were treated well in their workplace. And we can all do that. You don't have to be a therapist, you don't have to have studied psychology. um, but what the third thing that I want to mention here that really really matters is, many of us have had the experience of we've gotten angry and acted out or shut down around someone, and we don't even really want to, but we just can't stop ourselves. We feel out of control. You said something, it triggered me, and I'm off and running, or I've walked out and I never want to see you again, or I scream at you, or whatever I do, and then I feel terrible about the way I reacted. And generally, those kinds of unrestrained reactions really do come from unhealed wounds or bad role modeling and conditioning in our earlier life. And so, one of the greatest contributions any person can make is to heal their own pain, because I have never worked with anyone who has done that work who has become a more hateful, violent person. I never see it happen. When people have an opportunity to heal the hurt that happened to them, they become more loving, they become more tolerant, they become more kind, they become more generous. And often they want to turn around and actively help people like themselves, because they know what that journey of healing can bring. And I would love to see this be so much a part of not only our individual lives, but our national conversation. We could be a country that is a role model for healing, for
Right.
healing our own citizens and healing our relations.
Exactly. I agree. Yeah. Yeah. Great. So, thank you for sharing this, Bill. It's like it's really really helpful. And before we wrap, like shortly, if a message you want to share with the listeners, especially those who are feeling overwhelmed by the current state of the world.
Yeah, I would say people who are feeling overwhelmed, did you say?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's what I would say. If you feel overwhelmed, then find one thing that you can do. One of the things that I've learned as a psychotherapist profoundly is that human beings have a really hard time tolerating a feeling of powerlessness. It's not what we want to feel. And often, when we feel really overpowered by someone or by an institution or by a policy or by a condition or by somebody else's belief system or behavior, we just retreat into our youngest coping mechanisms, and that's normal. But what I've found in my own life and what I've often said to people is that powerlessness is best addressed by finding one place where you feel appropriately powerful.
Hmm.
In other words, not raging because you feel powerless, but maybe I can really focus better on my family, or I can work a little harder at my business to become more self-sustaining, or I can dare to have a conversation with someone that I've avoided because I just don't want to get into it with them. Maybe I
Hmm.
can summon my strength and say what really needs to be said in a way that is taking personal responsibility, not assaulting them, because that's a way of feeling powerful in an appropriate way in the world. Um, so find where you do have power, and it might be small, it might be large. Maybe you could change a policy in your office. Maybe you could just change how you talk to your children. Maybe you could write letters to your senators or your representatives. Um, whatever calls to you to do, but find where you have appropriate power and don't be afraid to exercise it. And if you are afraid to exercise it, then work on the part of yourself that's being stopped. How does
That's
that sound
awesome,
to you?
Ivy. Yeah. Exactly. That's really awesome. And I really love the concept which you mentioned about uh, the family is very important. The family dynamics is very important. I really loved that. Thanks for sharing this because I believe people should know these things. And this communication gap which is happening, people are not talking openly with people, or maybe into their families also. There could,
Mhm,
so
mhm.
those things first needs to be addressed, which is very very important. Yeah.
Well, and that's why I brought up those 6 elements of repair, because many people actually really don't know how to have a safe conversation. And they're so afraid of getting into a fight or of being ignored or being rejected that they don't talk at all. And so I think we really need to commit as a society, and not just in our own homes, to learning the skills for actually addressing conflict in a nonviolent, peaceful way that can lead to real resolution.
Exactly.
And that means we have to
Okay.
model it in our country,
Great.
right?
True. Yeah. Great. That's really lovely, and thank you so much for sharing this. And it's really, really another insightful episode of Healthy Waves, dear listeners, I believe. And also, I hope that today's discussion has inspired all of you and offered you those valuable perspectives on the topics that we explored today. And it's needless to mention, it's obviously a big thank you to our amazing guest, Phyllis. So for sharing her expertise and the personal journey with us. So, dear listeners, like as you remember, as you always know, that every episode of Healthy Waves is designed to spark thoughtful conversations and bring you closer to the understanding the diverse aspects of well-being and the success. So, if you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and leave a review, and stay connected with us for more engaging discussions and the expert advice. So, until next time, keep making waves in your own life, and remember that to embrace your true self, and it's very very important. And always do not forget to like check out Phyllis' book and her website. So Phyllis, if someone wants to connect with you, how they can connect?
Yes, please. I'm on all the social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube. I have lots of videos on YouTube. But the one of the best places to reach me is on my website, which is my name, Phyllis Levitt, www.phyllislevitt.com. And if you go to my website, there is a place where if you just sign in, you can get a free PDF that outlines in a way that's very personal for you to use those 6 elements of repair that I talked about, so that you can actually begin to apply them in your own life. And that's free. And please avail yourself of that. And if you want to contact me, please do. I'm happy to connect with anyone if you have a question or a need or whatever. So yeah, all the social media and my website are the best places to get me. I also have lots of articles on blogs on my website and Substack, and you can sign up for my newsletter. I really try to write very substantive newsletters every week.
Lovely. That's really lovely. So great, great. Thank you so much, dear listeners. And with this, I'm your host, Avik, signing off from Healthy Waves, and see you in the next episode. So thank you so much.
Thank you.